Welcome to this episode of the People Dividend podcast. I'm your host, Mike Horne. And today, as we begin the year, we're going to really dive into the future of work and what it means and explore how organizations can redesign work around energy, well-being, and sustainable performance. My guest today is someone who's been at the forefront of these conversations across Europe and beyond. I'd like to introduce today our guest, Penny de Villiers, a workplace strategist, author, and speaker based in the Netherlands. Penny helps organizations redesign work to prioritize energy, well-being, and sustainable performance. I hope everybody's hearing a theme here. We're going to work at the core of these. She's the author of From Leadership to Strategic Pioneering, and a recent TED speaker. So, Penny, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here, Mike. I follow your podcast and I love some of your insights and I really enjoy your sort of authentic approach. So I'm really glad to be part of these discussions.
Super. I'm so delighted to have you as a listener. It means the world to me. Thank you so much. Well, let's talk about your work, Penny, and as it focuses on redesigning workplaces to prioritize well-being and performance. What inspired you to focus on this area, and how have your own experiences shaped your perspectives in this regard?
Well, I am a person who is a workaholic and have always been that way and grew up under the hustle culture where, you never believed rest was really a reward and often one that was never achievable. So I suffered a really bad burnout. In fact, it was beyond burnout. It was chronic fatigue where I was crawling on the floor, literally. It took me 6 months to be able to get out of bed. At the time, I was very busy with a big merger and acquisition. It cost me my marriage. It cost me my career. It was a very expensive exercise and my health. And that was a big turning point for me to realize that I'd been completely unaware of myself as an entity in my career. Everything was so based on output. So I think that was a really big influencer in me pursuing this kind of career. And I love to work with people because I feel like I can relate both as a manager, which I have been as a leader, and as a person who experienced it. So that I think that's been the driving force.
That's for sure. I mean, thank you for sharing your story. It really helps me, and I'm sure everyone in our audience connect with the work on a more personal level. You had your experience, a very important experience. And why has this topic become such a big topic in organizations today? Sort of, beyond your personal experience. Why do you think well-being is such a big topic in organizations today?
Yeah, it's a good question because, it's always been, people have always said our people are the greatest asset. And, I think we've always been having this jargon over the years. And it's statistically become just a radical problem around the world. And I think it's based on the fact that workplaces have become, the pace of work has become relentless. The demand on people, they can't keep up with the demand on them of their jobs. But also, workplaces have really been focused on productivity. I mean, we live in a capitalistic world, let's face it, right? So if everything's based on capitalism, it's all about, is this making us money? And it's really been driven by productivity. And businesses look at returns on investment, and your actions have to show that you're making the company money. And so people's wellness has never really been measured until recently. And over the years, we have started to measure people's employee engagement scores and how happy they are as a nation, as a person at work. And we are starting to realize, well, people, as you know, with all the Gallup figures and employee engaged, people are disengaged, they're unhappy, they're miserable, is at the highest it's ever been globally. But I think we're really measuring it now, and technology, of course.
Yes, and it's sad to say that, at least according to the latest Gallup engagement research, the decline in engagement continues, at least in the United States, and at
Yes.
its lowest level since I think 2014. Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I would just pick up on something that you said, Penny, which is that leaders often say that people are their biggest asset, but we know that something stops them, prevents them from acting on that. And one of the results of that failure is a decline in engagement because 70% of employee engagement is within managerial control. So let's talk about this. What happens when leaders ignore well being? What are the long term consequences?
I think the consequences are what we're experiencing now. But the good news is, because there's a lot of, this is spoken about a lot, almost you can if there are three people in the room, two people are experiencing burnouts. It's so prevalent now that it's almost lost the real reality of the situation, because it's just become accepted that, that people are in this position. But what excites me, moving on, is that wellness is being looked at, is being measured. And when things are measured and you can start to have a look at the impact of that on your business, that's when businesses start to do something about it. Probably the research that I'm most excited about was, I don't know if you know Jean-Emmanuel Deneuve, and he's at Oxford, and his research with Indeed. And it was and is one of the biggest research um, collaborations that have taken place ever in the history of work. Over 25 million um, people have been involved in this research, asking questions. I wrote it down to keep myself focused, but like 250 million data sets. And 1,700 of those companies were listed companies. And this kind of research gives us real insight that the companies that do invest in well-being have a higher profitability return. They do better on the stock market, and they impact customer satisfaction. They impact returns in team spirit, culture, enthusiasm, motivation to do your job. So finally, we're getting some science. And when that happens, this is going to be the turning point in companies, because they're going to say, we want to make money, and this is going to help us make money.
Well, that's great. Let's bring it down. Let's start small and then go big. So, what role will managers play for starting small, at the individual level? What role are managers going to play in shaping that daily experience of well-being for employees? Despite the fact that micromanagement is very common still.
It's funny that, Mike, that you say that, because if you think about it, we hire these really more and more I'm talking about, workplace, people, and not so much on this, we intelligent people into our business, intellectuals, and then we don't allow them the space to bring their ideas, to shape the business. It is a conundrum as to why that happens.
It's a conundrum. I would disagree with you, Penny. I think it is, organizations value homeostasis. Organizations value the status quo. And it takes enormous amounts of energy um, to do anything about it.
You're
It
right.
can't be done. I think a lot of it is around intention, which is what resonates with me in your topic of well-being, is about intentionality. Focusing not focusing on profitability and focusing on the pathway to get there through wellness. It's a fascinating equation.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is spot on. So in the same survey, when they asked senior leaders, also people in transformation, HR people, change management people, do you believe in well-being as a strategy? And there 80% of people said yes. And then when they said, how many of you have a plan, a strategy plan implemented in your companies? And yeah, about 20% of them said yes. So there's this huge gap between what people say and what people are doing.
Well, I talked about that in my first book, Integrity by Design, Working and Living Authentically. I at least look for congruency between words and actions. Even better if beliefs are involved, right? Because sometimes people now know how to say the words and act and really don't believe in anything that they're saying. I'm convinced of that. So this congruency drives so much well-being, satisfaction, alignment, managerial experience. But let's talk about workplace redesign. I often think about the work that I did back at ExxonMobil, bringing cartographers together, rockheads, geoscientists for more collaborative efforts and more collaborative work. And that was workplace redesign to me, a lot of engineering, I think. But for you, what does workplace redesign mean? And how can organizations start making changes in workplace redesign to move towards the goals and aspirations that you're delivering for us in well-being?
Well, I think what I've experienced in the last few months is a massive move towards this integration of technology into the business and how to redesign the workforce around this. So, for example, in the news, like Salesforce just let 4,000 of their people go. Many of the people that they replaced were people that were replaced by sales bots that would then handle all the early calls that they couldn't keep up with the volume of customer inquiries. So they used the ChatGPT kind of tools, AI tools, to handle those calls and deal with the problems, and that therefore they didn't need a lot of people to do that. And then we have Ignite, who said that they dismissed 80% of their workforce because they didn't adapt. They weren't prepared to adapt and be early adapters to AI. So this is what I'm starting to see now, is that a lot of the design is around how people integrate technology into their teams and how those people cope with it emotionally, and how you deal with the fear of people losing their jobs and the communication around the change. And then perhaps some too many stories, but this is the kind of influence that's coming in and the demand that is coming in now to say, how do we do this?
Yeah, I find in my work that there are multiple factors at work. One is, at least in the US, the advance of the gig economy, where people need to put together multiple pieces of work or string to have meaningful careers or choose to do that. They're out either by choice or by necessity. So this advancing career. I also think that people understand organizations differently.
Yes.
I think there's a generational shift in what organizations mean. I think also we're looking at, even though people are overburdened, probably the dawn of the 4-day work week and what that means. However you think about that, whether that means that people are working less remotely, who knows? But I think, and the decline of management in organizations for lots of different reasons. So I think you take all of these confluences and it really points to a strategic opportunity for the work that you're doing, Penny.
Yes, I love the 4-day work week. I'm a big believer in it, and it's a big thing in the Netherlands. People have the option to work 32, 36, 40 hours when they apply for jobs. Some jobs are 40-hour-a-week jobs, but many of them, people will ask you up front, how many hours would you like to work?
Hmm.
But the interesting thing is they have this fantastic support for people who have workplace burnout, for almost up to 2 years, financial support and emotional and medical support. But our figures are still high in the Netherlands. Still,
Hmm.
1 in every 4 person has experienced workplace burnout. So, even though all of these measures are in place, and I think that's what all of the information is telling us, is that the way that work is structured, the fact that people use, for example, at least 10 apps a day, every day in their work. Those are the statistic that they move between these apps at least 25 times a day, that they are changing from one job to the other, and this kind of fragmentation is exhausting. The demand of Teams messaging and Slack channels, and so people are exhausted from the way that the work's structured, and this is where we have to look at what's happening to people and how we can structure things differently. But I'm a big fan of Cal Newport and his philosophy of deep work. So this kind of structure that I like to bring in, that, if you can be focused on something, you can really think about your work and really solve problems and feel proud of yourself and deliver great work when you're not fragmented all the time. So to allow this kind of structure would be one of my suggestions to people, to build this into your day, to look at all your task swapping and how you fragment your concentration. And these are the things that are tiring people out. And it's It's science. It's no
Yes,
longer, you know,
I try to work in short bursts to improve my focus as opposed to eliminating all the distractions because they seem to inevitably get larger and larger during the day. I mean, so for me, it's about the creation of focus to do deep work. And Penny, if our listeners wanted to get in touch with your work or buy your book, how would they do that?
my business is called rebalancedlife.com, and all the resources are available on that website. Or my name's Penny de Villiers. I'm on LinkedIn. Please connect with me and let's talk, because this is why I called my book Strategic Pioneering, because I've always been an adventurer, and I've always been curious. And I think a lot of us have this in us, and we want to learn, and we want to grow, and we want to, find new ways of doing things and improving. And I always thought of these pioneers that got on a ship and had to find new land, and they didn't know where they were going. I think we're with technology and the changes right now that we're facing, which are putting a lot of pressure on people. And even your top leaders in the area of AI say, well, I don't really know where we're going. So we're definitely pioneering, but I feel strategically, because we have data, and data is incredibly useful. And it really steers us in the right direction and gives us the facts of the decisions that we're making. So this combined makes this era probably for me one of the most exciting.
That's terrific. Following that mega view, I mean, for managers who want to start small, what's one step they can take today to improve well-being and performance within their team?
Talk to your team. We know our customers, for example, so well. Most people can tell you everything about their customers, from their receptionist's name to their wife's name to everything about that customer. But do we know that about our teams? And when you know that, if you take coaches, sports coaches, I think we can learn a lot from these people. They know when to rest their teams. They know when to push their teams. They know each team player knows exactly what role he plays in that team. Take this sports coach analogy and get to know your team. Do you know when they're energized? What makes them exhausted? And ask them these questions. And then have this strategy and start designing work around your team players. Are they putting that goal in? Are they good at defending? What are their strengths? Who are they? Who is this person behind this mask at work? And then start designing your team, your work around those team players. And now with AI, I think it's a very exciting era, because you can find out what your team's strength is and let them use the technology for the boring things. That's what people complain about, right? They say they're not content at work, that they don't feel they have purpose, that their job has become boring. So how can we change that? We can be architects of these people's work and watch them flourish and perform.
It's wonderful. I often tell many of my clients, and advice I give freely is that our best and greatest technology is to say hello. So I take that away from our conversation with Penny de Villiers today, reminding us, Penny, I think you're so thoughtful in reminding us that redesigning work isn't just about productivity. It's about creating environments where people can thrive. And I really appreciate all of your insights on well-being, burnout, and leadership. Encourage all of my listeners to get in touch with your work, to connect with your work, because it's certainly a powerful roadmap. It sounds like for both individuals and organizations looking to build and sustain performance over time. So thank you, Penny.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, and I'd like to encourage everyone who's listening to this episode to subscribe to the People Dividend podcast. Be sure to leave a review and tune in for the next episode of the People Dividend. Until then, stay well.